Welcome. Settle into comfort. Let your breathing slow, and allow your mind to drift into the past. Tonight, we will travel to the early 1900s, to a narrow strip of land in Central America, where one of the greatest engineering projects in history was carved through jungle and stone, the Panama Canal. Today it is celebrated as a marvel of global trade, a shortcut between oceans that reshaped the modern world. But for the men who built it, the canal was less a wonder and more a daily ordeal. Heat, insects, exhaustion, and illness shaped their experience far more than the vision of great ships passing through the locks. So let us begin gently with the workers, and what it meant to live even a single day in their world. The day begins in a crowded wooden barracks, where dozens of men share the same damp air. The scent of sweat, smoke, and mildew lingers, while mosquitoes buzz endlessly through the night. Sleep is shallow, broken by coughing, shifting bodies, and the constant chorus of the jungle outside. At dawn, a simple breakfast is served. Beans, rice, perhaps a piece of bread, and coffee if supplies allow. It is barely enough to prepare for the hours of labor ahead. Tools are gathered, and the men walk to the work site, their feet sinking into mud as the jungle opens into a scar of earth slowly taking shape as a canal. The work is repetitive and exhausting. Shovels bite into heavy soil, picks strike unyielding rock, and carts creak as they haul the earth away. Steam shovels roar and groan, yet much of the effort is still borne by human hands. The sun climbs quickly, and the air grows heavy until every breath feels like lifting weight. Sweat runs constantly, soaking through clothes until they cling like a second skin. Illness is never far away. Malaria weakens with fever and chills, while yellow fever strikes with frightening speed. The land itself resists the project. Sudden rains flood the trenches, and mudslides sweep away hours of effort in a moment. Workers labor on, but the jungle always seems to take back what has been stolen from it. By midday, there is only a short pause for food and water. The tools feel heavier, the hours longer, and the rhythm of work slows. When evening comes at last, the men return to the barracks, clothing stiff with dried sweat and mud. Supper is plain and quickly eaten, and night falls fast, but rest is uncertain. Mosquitoes fill the air, fevered groans drift across the room, and sleep, when it comes, is restless. This was the reality of thousands of men in Panama. Day after day, their lives followed the same rhythm of toil and endurance. For them, the canal was not yet a triumph of history, but a constant test of survival, lived one weary day at a time. The idea of a canal across Panama did not begin with the Americans who eventually completed it. Decades earlier, it was the French who first set their sights on cutting a waterway through the isthmus, and at the center of that vision stood Ferdinand de Lesseps. His name was already celebrated throughout Europe, for he had been the driving force behind another monumental achievement: the Suez Canal. Born in 1805, de Lesseps was trained as a diplomat, a man of connections and confidence. Yet his greatest legacy would not be in politics, but in engineering and ambition. He had guided the Suez Canal from dream to reality in the 1860s. Cutting a passage through the deserts of Egypt that linked the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, that project had been difficult, but its eventual success made de Lesseps a figure of near-mythical stature, a man known as the Great Engineer, even though he was not an engineer by training. Buoyed by his fame, he turned his attention to Panama. In his mind, if the desert could be conquered, then surely the jungle could too. He envisioned a sea-level canal, one without locks, slicing directly across the isthmus. It would be a triumph not only of engineering but of progress itself, a symbol of modernity connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. In Paris, he raised money and gathered support. Investors believed in his vision, and workers were recruited from the Caribbean, Europe, and beyond. Yet Panama was not Egypt. Where the Suez Project faced sand and heat, Panama presented mud, mountains, rivers, and a climate hostile to human health. Still, de Lesseps pressed forward. He traveled to the site, spoke confidently of success, and reassured supporters that the obstacles were minor. His optimism was unshakable, even as costs spiraled and work slowed to a crawl. For the men on the ground, the experience was far different. They faced the daily realities of fever, mudslides, and back-breaking labor. Progress was measured in frustration rather than miles. Death rates soared and morale sank. Meanwhile, in Paris, de Lesseps continued to promise success. convinced that persistence alone would win the day. Ultimately, the French effort collapsed. By the late 1880s, the company went bankrupt. De Lesseps himself, once hailed as a hero, was brought to trial in a scandal that rocked France. Accused of mismanagement and fraud, his reputation crumbled. The canal remained unfinished, little more than an open wound carved into the earth. De Lesseps lived until 1894, long enough to see his grand vision fail. In his final years, he was frail, his once powerful voice reduced to whispers. He died not as the triumphant builder of Panama, but as a symbol of hubris, a reminder that ambition alone cannot overcome nature. And yet, his dream did not disappear. The failures of the French effort laid the groundwork for what came later. When the Americans took over, they learned from his mistakes, redesigned the project, and finally completed the canal. De Lesseps' legacy was therefore twofold: the triumph of Suez and the cautionary tale of Panama. His story reminds us that great ambitions often rest on fragile human shoulders. Where others saw glory, he carried the weight of disappointment. And though his name is still remembered, it is tied forever to both triumph and failure. Among all the challenges of the canal, none loomed larger than the Culebra Cut. It was a stretch of land only a few miles long. It became the most difficult obstacle of the entire project. Known at the time as the Galliard Cut, it sliced through the continental divide. The backbone of Panama, where steep ridges of earth and rock stood in the way of connecting oceans. From a distance, the cut appeared as an enormous open wound in the earth. Hills were carved away, layer by layer, until they collapsed into a jagged trench. Steam shovels lined the slopes like patient beasts, biting into soil, lifting it into rail cars, and carrying it away to distant dumps. Thousands of men swarmed across the site, shoveling, hauling, and blasting. The noise was constant. Whistles, engines, the crash of rockfalls echoing down the valley. The mystery was not in the idea of cutting through the land. That part was understood. It was in the way the earth refused to stay in place. Workers would dig away tons of rock, only to watch the slopes give way in sudden landslides. Entire weeks of labor could be erased in a moment as the ground shifted and slid back into the channel. Some slides were small and unexpected, but others swallowed whole work crews, rail lines, and equipment. It seemed as though the mountain itself resisted the intrusion, always pushing back, always reclaiming what had been taken. Geologists puzzled over the problem. The tropical rains saturated the clay, loosening it into flowing mud. Beneath the surface, layers of unstable earth shifted unpredictably. Some called it nature's rebellion, others simply bad luck. But for the men in the trenches, it meant an endless cycle of digging and redigging. The cut grew deeper, but never felt finished. For workers, the Culebra Cut was both uninspiring and wearying. Standing at its edge, one could see the vast scale of human ambition. A canyon carved by hand and machine, yet within it, the conditions were suffocating. Dust filled the air during the dry season, coating skin and lungs, while in the wet season torrents of rain turned everything to mud. The ground trembled with explosions, the air rang with the sound of iron against stone, and the sense of impermanence lingered. Even when the canal finally opened in 1914, the cut remained unstable. Landslides continued to occur for decades, long after the first ships passed through. Engineers strengthened the slopes and cleared the debris, but the earth never ceased to shift. To this day, maintaining the cut remains one of the canal's ongoing challenges. It is perhaps fitting that the greatest obstacle of the canal was not a single moment of danger or a single engineering error, but the slow, persistent resistance of the land itself. The Culebra Cut is a reminder that human ambition can carve mountains, but it can never fully quiet the forces of nature. While thousands of laborers endured mud, fever, and endless toil, life looked very different for the American officials who oversaw the canal. Their world was one of order and relative comfort, a stark contrast to the chaos of the work sites. They lived in well-constructed wooden houses, painted white, and raised above the damp ground on stilts. Wide verandas caught the breeze, while screened windows kept out mosquitoes. Their lawns were neatly trimmed, their surroundings carefully managed to resemble small American towns rather than the jungles of Central America. For these men and their families, the Canal Zone was more than a workplace. It was a community transplanted. Schools were established for children, shops stocked familiar goods, and clubs offered a social life modeled after that of the United States. There were concerts, dinners, and leisurely gatherings under the shade of porches. On Sundays, families walked to church services, dressed in light cotton suits and pressed dresses, the sounds of hymns rising above the hum of the jungle beyond. Meals reflected the same contrast. While workers often subsisted on simple rations, officials dined on imported foods. Refrigerated ships brought supplies from the United States, ensuring that their tables held butter, meat, and fresh milk. Dinner was served by attendants, often local or West Indian staff, whose presence was a daily reminder of the sharp social divisions in the Canal Zone. This divide was not accidental. The American administration created a system that separated workers into two categories: the gold roll and the silver roll. The gold roll included American officials, engineers, and skilled white workers who were paid in gold-backed currency and received housing, medical care, and privileges. The silver roll included West Indian laborers and other foreign workers who were paid in silver coin and lived in barracks with far fewer comforts. It was a system that reflected and reinforced existing racial and social hierarchies, ensuring that life in the zone was unequal by design. Yet even within the comfort of their homes, the officials were not free from challenges. The tropical climate weighed on them too. Clothes clung in the humidity, and illnesses spread even in cleaner quarters. The responsibilities of overseeing such a vast and costly project were immense, and the pressure to succeed never fully lifted. Many officials moved in and out of Panama within only a few years, unable to endure the conditions for long. Still, their lives seemed worlds apart from those of the men digging in the Culebra Cut or enduring fever in makeshift hospitals. For the officials, the canal was a challenge to be managed, a problem of engineering and logistics. For the workers, it was survival. The contrasting experiences reveal the many layers of life in the Canal Zone, from veranda to barracks, from imported butter to a tin plate of rice. As the years passed, the canal grew closer to completion. In 1914, the first ship passed through, marking the end of decades of struggle. For the officials, it was a moment of triumph, a celebration of American resolve. For the laborers, it was a quiet victory too, but one rarely recorded, a testament to their sweat, endurance, and countless sacrifices. The story of the Panama Canal is one of contrasts. On one side, the dreamers and officials who imagined a pathway between oceans, convinced that human will could reshape the earth. On the other, the thousands of ordinary men who labored day after day, their efforts measured in shovels of earth, their health often worn away by heat, mud, and fever. Between them stood the land itself, mountains that slid back into place, rivers that swelled with tropical rains, and a jungle that seemed never to surrender. To think of it now is to imagine a world both distant and familiar. A world where progress demanded sacrifice, where ambition carried both glory and ruin, and where the divisions of class and race shaped daily life. Yet it is also a story of persistence, of projects that faltered, of lessons painfully learned, and of a vision that, though delayed, eventually came to pass. As you picture the canal today, ships gliding steadily from ocean to ocean, the struggles of the past may seem almost invisible. The noise of shovels and engines has faded. The cries of laborers, the speeches of officials, the sound of slides crashing down the slopes of Culebra Cut, all are quiet now. What remains is the waterway itself, a lasting reminder of human determination and of the costs it carried. Tonight, as you rest, you can leave behind the fevered camps, the echo of picks against stone and the humid air of the jungle. You are not there in the barracks, nor on the veranda, nor beneath the weight of the tropical rains. You are here in comfort and safety, with the luxury of reflection. The canal exists, but the burdens of its making are no longer yours to bear. Let your thoughts drift with the slow current of history. Imagine the water flowing gently through the locks, ships rising and falling with quiet precision. Let the rhythm of that movement carry you, steady and calm, until sleep comes to meet you. The world of the past fades away, and only rest remains.